when I get here in the morning. I always check Google Classroom first because I use Google Classroom to set up. So I check for due dates in Google Classroom and see kind of what I've assigned to students and what things are due so that I can grade them and check them and get them back to them. And I use the to-do list off on the left-hand side to kind of keep track of all of the assignments. I hadn't found that until this year, and so it was overwhelming until I found that to-do list to make sure I was getting everything kind of checked in and going. I also make sure we share a set of Chromebooks through 2 classrooms. So out in the hallway are all 31 Chromebooks. I make sure we've got our 15 in the classroom. I have dish racks because they fit perfectly, a Chromebook in each space on the dish rack. So that way the kids aren't plugging and unplugging the Chromebooks every day. I only really have to plug those in once a week. Fridays for sure they get plugged in. Sometimes by Thursday they're down to 7 or 8%, but they still last through the day, and the kids will plug them in for us. So that's typical technology-wise, kind of ways to set up for a typical day. If I'm starting a new assignment though, especially if it's in Google Classroom, I will put the assignment in, and if it's a template that I want the kids to use, I'll make the template and then assign it and give them each a copy. Whatever that has to be, setting all that up for the day. The bulk of the time that they have time to work on computers, I'm pulling small groups. So I'm automatically, out of a class, I've got 25 students, that automatically kicks out 4 to 6 students who are working with me. So we've got that, so that gets us down to about, 25, about 19 kids, and we've got 15 computers. Then they have a must-do, may-do list that that's the other thing I do every morning. So I check my must-do, may-do list, and it's got things on there that the kids can do, and I try to have a balance of technology and book, paper, pencil, so that they're getting a balance of each. So there's always an option for the kids to be able to work with technology and paper, pencil. Some of those would be the workplaces and bridges. There's games that they play at 4th grade, so that's always an option for them. Reading a book, just grabbing a book and finding a corner and reading, and their word sorts for Words Their Way. I've been tempted to put the word sorts into a digital format, but it's one of the options where they don't need a computer, so I've kept it paper, pencil, gluing, and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I take care of that. I think the issue with that is the thought that every kid has to be doing the same thing. And with technology, I think that allows us to get away from that. Like, we need to use technology to differentiate our instruction and to be able to have kids doing any number of things in my classroom at the same time. So, a lot of times people will walk in and my kids are all over the place doing 10 or 12 different activities depending on what their choice is for that particular time. So every day we look at our must-do, may-dos. There's a chunk of time for my classroom. We've got about 55 minutes, and we call it intervention enrichment time every day, where we're not to teach anything new, and that's when a lot of our IEP kids are pulled for their individualized instruction, and I'm left with a group of kids who either aren't being pulled that day or they're not on IEPs. So we keep a running list of must-do, may-dos, and it's on the board. Every day I check it, and the must-do list, they can't do anything on the may-do list until they finish must-dos. So the other kind of shift for me when I went to technology was I'll assign something, but it's not due that day. I can't hardly ever get an assignment due in a day from these kids. I have to give them 2 days because we've got 15 Chromebooks and they've got to have time to work on it. Because in addition to sharing a Chromebook, that possibility, I'm also pulling them in small groups, so some days they don't have time to work independently because they worked with me that day. One of the big reasons I decided to shift in this direction was the need for differentiation. I've got I've got 6 kids on an IEP, I've got 7 kids who are identified gifted, each of which need their own individualized instruction, and then I've got those students in the middle based on pre and post tests that need different instructions through different times of the day. I felt that technology made it easier, and using Chromebooks made it easier because the district provides 10 marks. My principal has purchased a Reflex, which is a math fact program subscription for our school, so students that need that is an easy way for them to get practice. A Google Classroom, I'm able to upload. I've found ways to get the kids to be able to watch YouTube videos that are science appropriate for them, so it allows them to really use what they're interested in and to be able to have choice during that time when I'm meeting with a small group. They've got their must-do list, but they can still choose from that of what they want to work on at that particular time. So differentiation was the main reason. The second reason was just student engagement. I needed something when I'm working with a group of students. I needed to know that the rest of my students, the other 20 or 19 that were sitting out in the classroom, were working on something that was purposeful and that they were really putting their best effort forth in every single time. So that was one reason I feel like I've accomplished that. For the most part, not every day, for the most part. And the rest is I just like trying new things. Like I don't want to do the same thing over and over again just because I've always done it that way. I want to find new things. These are kids that know more than I do about technology, so it's intimidating sometimes to try to teach them something, particularly on Drive, and they teach me a faster, better way to do what I just tried to do that. So learning something new. I use flexible seating in the classroom as well in addition to this, and I switched to that. This is my second full year, and I switched to it mid-year, not last school year, but the year before. And it was a need because with the technology, there's a lot of group projects where the kids are either working in pairs or they're sharing their work and working in a group. And so they can do that digitally and be across the classroom working on it, but also there's times when they need to work together and collaborate on a project that's not using technology. So we needed more table space and then just floor space to be able to spread out what they're working on. And so I got rid of a bunch of desks, brought in a couple of tables that other teachers said I could borrow until they needed them back. Got rid of my teacher desk because it took up a lot of space that the kids would need to be able to do that. And so they're able to choose where they're sitting, kind of how they're sitting with their technology. If they have a tablet, if they're bringing in a tablet, or they have the Chromebooks that flip back to a tablet, a lot of them choose to sit on the floor, sit on a floor cushion, the rocking chair, somewhere a little more comfortable. If they're typing in a Google Doc or something, most of my students are at a desk, and most of them are sitting at a chair or a wobble stool. They don't tend to sit on the bouncy balls when they're doing that. And so the ability to move from seat to seat or seating choice to seating choice, depending on what they're working on at that point, helped keep them on task, I feel like, throughout the day, because they're not sitting in the same desk, in the same seat, working on different projects throughout the day. It's kind of helped with that. One of the struggles that I've had is it doesn't work the same for every group of kids. This is the year I feel like I have a little less freedom with my kids than I have in years past, because the need with this group of kids seems to be more structure and more guidance over what they're doing. In the past, I've had a schedule that the kids picked up at the beginning of the day, and I worked with small groups pretty much all day. There was like a whole group reading lesson and a whole group math lesson, and the rest of the day was a lot of small groups besides science, and I switched, taught science one day and social studies the next day. This group as a whole has a hard time planning their day. So that group of students, they would pick up a schedule every morning with all the times, and they would check the board, and I would have listed which groups I was meeting with at that time, and that would be the first thing they'd fill in. And then if they weren't meeting with me, they had to choose from the must-do and may-do list what they were going to work on. So they had a plan of what to work on every point during the day. I tried that this year, and it was a bomb. Like, it just didn't work for these kids. So I had to reassess that and just decided that there was a little more whole group instruction this year, and then my IE time is the bulk of my must-do, may-do time for the kids to be able to get stuff done. And then I bring that kind of must-do, may-do feeling into science and social studies, because this year I teach both subjects every day, half hour each day, where we kind of have some different projects going on, particularly in science, where maybe one group of kids is working on making waves for a beach, and another group is working on reading something on RAS Plus on the technology, and then we flip depending on the day for that. Another struggle initially was the Chromebook management, which I feel these dish racks have been the solution. It's worked every year, keeping the Chromebooks in here. It eases the time for kids picking them up, and it also keeps them safe. So the rule was nobody leaves the classroom until they're always back in the dish rack. Things like at the beginning of the year, teaching them they carry a Chromebook with two hands. They carry it closed. They don't carry anything else in their hands when they have a Chromebook. No water bottles or folders, because it ends up something gets dropped because they're kids. So that was one thing. And I think I already mentioned this, but just the tech support, sometimes that's a struggle because it's little stuff, and I feel like even contacting someone like you, it's like, I just don't know how to make a brochure in Google Docs. Well, I tell the kids, I want you to make a brochure, and I want you to figure out how you're going to do it any way you want. It has to fold 3 ways, and a lot of times they're the ones that can kind of teach me. Just getting rid of that, I don't want to call it fear, but it's fear of not knowing something, and letting the kids kind of feel empowered too, and it gives them more ownership of this technology, and it allows them to speak up and share their thoughts too. That's another thing. So working in small groups, I kind of have this rule that, unless you're bleeding or dying or a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers team walks through the door, you cannot interrupt Mrs. Griffith. You have to keep working. So there were always technical issues with computers, something as simple as the screen's really big or it's on Spanish and I can't get it back. So we've got jobs. 2 of my students are assigned as computer captains, and I have not had a year yet, and I've been 2-to-1, 4 years now, because I was in EdSite, so I have one of the first classrooms. I've never had a year that I haven't had a student who is super strong in technology and can help every other student with 90% of the problems when I'm in small groups. So that's huge, is finding that student who has that and being able to give them the leeway to fix any issues that come up while I'm in small group. It relieves a ton of time. It is a big change. So I use more videos for kids. I feel like using technology brings the world kind of to them a little more than it has in the past. So even when we're talking about erosion, for them to see a video of an earthquake and then a video of a tsunami and then write about how the 2 of them are alike and how they're using erosion to change the land, they're able to watch it, and type it, rather than me showing a whole class video and then showing another whole class video and then having them write about it. I'm able to put all that stuff in Google Classroom. They can watch it at home and then type it on their own time, and then it allows me to look at their typing, their writing, and provide comments to them as they're writing, rather than wait till they're all done, comment, and then send back. I can also implement some interventions when I would normally be teaching whole class. So that whole class video, and I would normally have to sit here and everybody has to listen to it, if they're able to watch that independently, because it doesn't involve any reading, I can pull a small group, work on an intervention in math or reading while the rest of the class is watching that, and then switch it out. So it kind of gives me I feel a little bit like I'm planning a little more. Because I'm able to do that, it allows me to work here on a lesson while they're also working on a lesson. But it's not more work, I wouldn't say. It's just a different way of organizing what I'm doing. I would start with Google Classroom or Schoology. I tried Schoology initially, and then once Google Classroom was out, I played with that a bit, and then some improvements were made upon it, and I prefer that over Schoology myself. It organizes everything, and it allows kids to use Google Drive. It's what we use as a district, so it's a lot easier that way. But I would start with that, because you can even do whole class lessons that way until you feel comfortable with Google Classroom. And I think that's the gateway to getting the differentiation in. In Google Classroom, I assign my book clubs, so I just assign this assignment to 6 students, this other assignment to 6 other students, this assignment to 4 students. I've got whole class assignments sitting in there. You can organize it by topic, so I can just look at all the science assignments or all the book club assignments or whatever my topics are. I feel like it organizes me, and it's so user-friendly that that's the place that I would suggest starting it. I would design one lesson that you've always done, and then, just kind of try one lesson a week to be able to get it from the way you've always done it, implementing some kind of technology with it, and ask for help. I'm emailing you and Zach all the time. Anytime I have a question, I don't hesitate to just send it off, because you either answer it or you get me to somebody who does answer it or something like that. So I don't feel like I'm out here on an island trying it out either. And the other thing I wanted to say about that was, oftentimes you have to talk about your lessons with someone like Drew or Zach or anybody who's a tech person, because oftentimes I'll tell you what I want. Like, I want to do a video. I want my kids to do a book report video. I don't want them to have to write. I just want it to be engaging and fun. And they come back with, oh, there's an app for that. There's this cool thing you can do with that. And I don't even know what's out there until I talk to somebody about what I want to see that it's even a possibility. So, Google Classroom, talking to someone about what you want, because there's probably something out there that can help you do that with technology. And then trying one thing a week, just one thing to keep going. I think this is where the kids are going to be. It's how their future's going to look in jobs. It's how their future's going to look in college. And I just want to make sure that they've got kind of the skills necessary to be able to balance technology and face-to-face conversation. I don't want it to be all tech, and I don't want it to be no tech. I need to find that balance and have kids to be able to find